What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Performance Playbook podcast. Today, I have an exciting guest, Dr. Chaffee. How we doing?
That's it. I'm doing good. Thanks, man. How are you?
Good. So, this has been a long time coming for me. I've been really eager to get on not just someone that's carnivore, but a doctor that's carnivore. Especially with like the knowledge that you have and the knowledge that you've been posting. But just so people know, can we get a little bit of a background from you?
Yeah. So I'm American medical doctor. I currently live in Australia. However, I've been here for about 5 years now. In practice, I have a private practice in metabolic health or preventative medicine, trying to address the underlying root cause of illness as opposed to just plastering over things with medications and procedures. And I also have been going back into residency for neurosurgery as well. So that's what I was doing previously. And then I left my previous training program for a family emergency, took some time off, was doing humanitarian work, and started getting back into it. And I've just discovered that diet and nutrition plays a massive, massive role in health, not only for myself, my athletic performance, and my overall health, but in the health of my patients as well. And I found that these so-called chronic diseases that are heretofore thought to be incurable just go away, basically, if you just start eating a more biologically appropriate diet. So I've been trying to apply that to my patient population with pretty remarkable results. And if I, if you hadn't come across this before, you'd just be like, well, that's just snake oil, just sort of selling Lucky Charms. But it's true, and it's happening. We're seeing this in randomized controlled trials in humans now as well. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So I was sitting here like before this podcast trying to figure out where I wanted to take it because there's so many damn angles I could take this. The one piece that maybe I do want to start out with was just more of like a personal story. And I do find it kind of remarkable because you said you've had so many incredible changes with your patients and stuff like that. And sadly, I had to go through it myself. And I think that maybe is the frustrating part for a lot of people is they have to not just like lightly search to find a new way, a different path to like fix their health instead of, going down, the whole original American doctorate way of taking a unbelievable amount of drugs or hiding stuff. So I myself dealt with a lot of like IBS problems. And so we would go on these international competitions and I would bring packets of Imodium, packets upon packets. And I would just take them like candy because I knew what was going to happen because I didn't know what to eat, how to eat. And obviously on top of that, I'm trying to hide a lot of injuries. So I'm taking, all these other drugs on top of it. And I had to go through this self-discovery. And of course, carnivore was like the most hidden, quiet thing in the corner that I had to first go through a vegan diet and do all of these other things that made me feel even worse to get to more. I'd say I prescribe more to an animal-based, like Paul Saladino, but it took me so long. And I guess the question here that I'm getting around about too is why has this been so pushed off and hidden for so long to where people are now just starting to hear about it?
Well, that's the thing. It sort of goes back a long way. I mean, certainly there's been a recent surge of anti-meat propaganda saying that it causes disease, it causes cancer, it causes heart disease, I mean, there was something that came from Harvard. It's a survey study, right? So they say, oh, what did you eat last year? And then we're trying to like actually think of that as real data. And calling things like pizza and lasagna and fast food and sandwiches meat. And so if you've eaten any of those things, you're a meat eater, and meat eaters have a higher rates of diabetes, and they also have higher rates of smoking and drinking and lack of exercise and all these other sorts of things. So they're very, very poor associative studies, and these studies are used to manipulate and to be able to say, hey, I have a justification to make my conclusion, this headline that meat causes cancer or meat causes diabetes or associated with it or something like that. And you just vilify this. So there's been a big push in that direction. One of the reasons is financial. So we have a lot of financial interests in the Beyond Meat sort of group, all those fake meat categories. They're pumping in millions into these basically just completely bogus studies. They're paying for them at Harvard, they're paying for them at Stanford, and they are garbage, to put it plainly. And they're trying to vilify meat so that you instead buy fake meat and those meat alternatives. So that's one reason. Another reason is because Coca-Cola's and the Pepsis and Kellogg's of the world, they all understand that all of their products are plant-based, and they understand that when someone goes plant-based, they don't go quinoa and sprout salads. They go junk food. They buy corn chips and Oreos. That's what they get. And so it's just going down the processed food line. So that's big business for them. So Coca-Cola alone spends 11 times the amount of money on nutritional research every year than the NIH, than the National Institutes of Health, right? So the vast majority, and that's just Coca-Cola. That's not Kellogg's and Pepsi and General Mills and all these other sorts of things. Nestle, so they're all pumping out huge amounts of money to vilify meat and push people more down a plant-based route because it makes them a lot of money. And then there's the added layer that this is making us sick, and they're heavily invested in the pharmaceutical side of things and the diabetes side of things, the chronic disease side of things. And that's a multi-trillion-dollar a year industry. So it's estimated by 2030 that worldwide we'll be spending over $13 trillion a year treating just 5 chronic diseases: cancer, cardiovascular disease, respiratory pulmonary diseases, diabetes, and mental health issues. So that's only those 5, and that's from the Harvard School of Public Health. They're saying over $13 trillion will be spending on treating those sorts of diseases. So that money's going to someone, that's going to people, and that is an interest that they want to protect, and so they are also putting out this nonsense. Back further, again, there were financial interests. The Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, one of the top medical journals in the world, published in 2016 actual internal memos from the sugar companies detailing how they paid off 3 Harvard professors to falsify data and publish fraudulent studies to make it appear as if cholesterol caused heart disease, when it's much more likely to be sugar, and then to exonerate sugar and say that it was safe. And one of those professors was named head of the USDA, and he was the one who authored and published the USDA declaration saying that cholesterol caused heart disease. So this is a matter of record. The sugar companies made up the idea that cholesterol was bad and therefore meat was bad to protect sugar, because there were people that were doing research and found a very strong correlation between the rise in refined sugar and the rise in heart disease, which is a very new disease. The first death from heart attack proven on autopsy in America was in 1912. There wasn't a single case report of death from myocardial infarction in America prior to 1912. There's a handful in Europe in the 1800s. There's one that I've ever heard of in the 1700s. So this is a very rare cause of death prior to the 1900s. Then in 1930, when we were eating the least amount of meat in 200 years in America, it becomes the number 1 killer in America. So obviously there's no connection with meat. And people say, well, we just didn't notice it. No, that's not true. If you read textbooks from the 1800s, I have a textbook from Sir William Osler, who is very famous. He was the first professor of medicine at Johns Hopkins. And I have a textbook that was my great-grandfather's, he graduated from Columbia Medical School in the 1890s. And so I have his old textbook from William Osler. Nowhere in there is there anything about myocardial infarctions. They have very detailed pictures and descriptions of all the pathologies that happen to the heart, all the different structural abnormalities, all the different things that can happen. If you had a whole area of the heart that died, scarred down, or ruptured, and say, oh, wow, that's a cause of death, you're going to notice that. That's not a subtle finding. And they did in the 1800s and 1700s, even going back to Da Vinci and Dr. Harvey, who described the circulatory system and showed that it was the heart pumping blood, not the lungs, that there were examples of atherosclerosis. So they found these weird little plaques in there, and that's really weird. But they understood that this was abnormal. They didn't see these in most of the examples. They just saw little bits of plaque every now and then, but no heart attacks, right? So they could see this, and they found a couple examples of heart attacks, but very few. And so this is something that you could see. They weren't there to see, and there were tons of autopsies being done. That was a major, major, major part of a doctor's life, is doing autopsies and dissections. And so, it was purely invented by the sugar companies that cholesterol was to blame in order to protect sugar. You have these big processed food companies, they're trying to protect their interests. And so they're perpetuating all this as well. Now you've got the whole pharmaceutical giant, the behemoth that is pharma, and they're trying to perpetuate their whole issue as well. Goldman Sachs had a slide from one of their board meetings leaked, and it said, "Is it a viable business model to cure disease?" Right? And so they're saying, no, we don't want to cure disease. We want to treat diseases. Because the money's in the medicine. We give the medicine. If you're on medicine, you're on diabetes medication, heart medication, blood pressure medication, for your entire life. Well, that's a lifelong customer. Like any drug dealer, you want to hook them young and keep them for the rest of your life. And so that's what they do. They're not trying to cure diseases. They're not trying to get to the root cause. They're trying to sell a product. I have no problem with the product model. I do have, but we just need to understand what their motivations are. Their motivations are to treat the symptoms, not to cure disease. So we need to do that. We need to take that on our shoulders, because they're not going to do it for us. If you want to go even further back, you go to the early 1800s, during the temperance movement and the different sorts of religious groups that thought that lust was a sin and that masturbation was a sin, sex was a sin. And so they said you should go on a vegetarian diet because this suppressed sexual urges. Anytime you see animals in the wild or an experiment not having sexual urges, reducing their fertility and interest in mating, they're sick. There's something wrong, right? And that's basically what's happening to us. You mess up your health, you mess up your hormones, and you're just not interested in sex. Your body's saying, look, you're not healthy enough to procreate. Just don't even think about it. And they're saying, well, that's really good. Well, because lust is a sin, right? So you don't want those sexual urges. And so that was something that was encouraged. And if you look at in the early 1800s, we eat a lot of meat in America, and it slowly was trickling down. That's why it sort of troughed in the 1920s and 30s, and then it started picking up after that, sort of a U-shaped curve. That was being, like graham crackers. That was something that a lot of us would eat as kids. We give those to kids. That was invented by Sylvester Graham as a bland plant-based alternative to actually suppress and dampen sexual urges in children. That was actually why he made that in the mid 1800s. And sort of some followers of his, someone who thought he was onto something, was a lady named Ellen G. White, who was one of the founding members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which is a sect of Christianity. And she said that she had a vision from God saying that, no, not only should you do this, you have to do this, that lust is a sin, meat causes lust, therefore meat is a sin, you have to stop eating it. And so codified that into their religion. And so that stuck. And that hasn't gone anywhere. It's not like they've just sort of had that pronouncement and then they've gone away. Her protege was a kid named John Harvey Kellogg, who grew up to be Dr. Kellogg, very famous, very influential doctor. Anthony Hopkins played him in a movie called The Road to Wellville. He was a bit batty, but he was indoctrinated early that masturbation and sex was a sin, so to the point that he never had sex with his wife in like 60 years. They adopted all their kids, and he was just like, nope, sex is evil even if you're married. So he was really bought into that. He invented Kellogg cereals and cornflakes in order to suppress sexual urges. That was not a secret. He wasn't like hiding that. He was like, this is why you eat this, to suppress your sexual urges. He had people that would come into the Battle Creek Sanitarium in Michigan, and he would put people on plant-based diets. He was very famous. Carnegie went to him. Rockefeller went to him. Henry Ford went to him. Presidents went to him. He was a very, very famous doctor. He was one of the original doctors to the stars. And this is what he did. He would put people on these plant-based diets, and he really pushed for this. And then Kellogg's became obviously this big multinational company The Seventh-day Adventist Church founded 20 other cereal companies, including the largest cereal manufacturer here in Australia called Sanitarium Foods, which are all tax exempt. They've never paid taxes. They're still owned by the church. So they're fabulously wealthy. They've had a lot of influence over the decades. The first basically nutritionist that sort of founded nutritional sciences in America at a university level was a lady named Lena Cooper, who was a Seventh-day Adventist. She founded the American Nutritional and Dietetics Association. She wrote the first textbook taught in universities on nutrition in 1925. It's still in print. The most recent edition is still in print. It's still being taught in Ivy League schools today in America. Then people like Dr. Pritikin, who pushed this heart-healthy diet. That was a household name. I grew up knowing who Dr. Pritikin was. Well, he was also a Seventh-day Adventist, or at least taught at the Seventh-day Adventist private medical school in Loma Linda. And I remember when I was applying to medical schools, I sort of looked at that, and they just said, yeah, if you're not a Seventh-day Adventist church member, you're not even allowed to apply. So I was like, all right, whatever that is. So the idea that you could be a professor there and not be affiliated with the church is probably unlikely. The McGovern report in 1977, Senator McGovern said, okay, let's take a look on what's healthy to eat and not eat. And they said, maybe we should be a bit careful about cholesterol and fat. That was written by a Seventh-day Adventist church member. Now, the discipline and specialty in medicine called lifestyle medicine, which sounds great. You address diet and lifestyle, you fix the diet, you start exercising more, maybe you get people off medications. Great idea. The only problem is that it's a Trojan horse. It's a screen for, again, a vegan diet, a plant-based diet. That's the diet that they recommend. And that was brought about by the Seventh-day Adventist Church within the last sort of 2 decades. And a lot of people heard of the blue zones, and we have the blue zone. I won't even call them a study. It's a propaganda piece. And then the Netflix special and things like that made by a guy named Dan Buettner, a Seventh-day Adventist church member who then sold the rights to the blue zones to the Seventh-day Adventist church for around $70 million. And they're just pumping this stuff out. It's a flat out lie. These blue zones eat far more meat than the general populace. And they actually never confirmed a lot of their ages. A lot of them actually happen to be perpetrators of pension fraud. They lied about their age so they could qualify for pensions early because they were poor, or their older relatives died and they just said, yeah, grandma's still here, keep sending that check. And so there's a lot of fraud being done there, not least of all by Dan Buettner, who flat out lied and said, like, the people in Sardinia were very plant-based, they only eat meat once a week. I had a friend of mine, Professor Bill Schindler, who's a professor of paleoanthropology at University of Maryland, since retired. And he went over there on a research trip to Sardinia and met with the people that Dan Buettner met with. And they even said, why does everyone think that we're all plant-based? Like, what the hell is that about? He said that they're not full carnivore, but they are almost there. They eat a massive amount of meat and dairy. They all have their own pigs. They all have their own sheep. They all make their own cheese, and they'll have some tomatoes and some olives and a bit of homemade wine, and that's it. It's meat after that. And one of the things that Dan Buettner said is that they only eat meat once a week, and he was there for several days. They're only eating meat. And then one day they said, hey, we're going to have meat tomorrow. He's like, what do you mean you're going to have meat tomorrow? Like, we've been eating meat every day. He's like, no. What we mean is we're going to cook a whole sheep, and we're just basically going to barbecue all day and just eat meat for like 6 hours. And so Dan Buettner said, so that language confusion said, yeah, we eat meat once a week. He's like, oh yeah, they only eat meat once a week. They said that, not me. Right. So it's just there's just a lot of lies and propaganda. It's started out to perpetuate an ideology, and that is still in effect, but that sparked another monster that is now the giant processed food industry. They founded the processed food industry, and obviously it's sparked up since then in other realms, but they started it, right? And now that's just grown a life of its own, and now they're trying to perpetuate this, and they're trying to push their investment. And like The CEO from Kellogg cereal is getting on news now saying like, oh yeah, eat cereal for dinner and all that sort of nonsense. So they're obviously have financial interests at heart. The pharmaceutical industry have financial interests at heart, but there's still this ideology behind it. They are still pushing this ideology that has not gone away either. So sort of a long-winded answer, but it's a sort of a big question because there's a lot of reasons why
Yeah.
people are trying to trash meat, which is the food that we've been eating for millions of years. And the only thing you need to know about the diet of an animal is what do they eat in the wild? What have they been eating since time immemorial? Right, whatever that is, you do that. Zookeepers, they don't try to do studies and give surveys to jaguars on what they might want to eat. They just look, what the hell does a jaguar eat in the jungle? Okay, let's feed them that. Same thing with an elephant and a koala. I mean, do you need a survey to figure out what a koala eats or a panda? No, you just watch them, right? So what have humans been eating for millions of years? We've been eating meat. What have we been eating during the ice ages? What was there to eat during the ice ages in the Arctic Circle when people were crossing the land bridge from Asia to North America on foot? What was there to eat? It was meat, right? That's it. And so, the law of biology is that of adaptation. You adapt to your environment or you die, you go extinct. And so we've been well and truly adapted to meat for millions and millions and millions of years, so that there's nothing that's going to be in meat that we're not well adapted to if there was anything harmful, which there isn't. 70% of all animals species in the world are carnivores, and that's because it's really safe to eat and it's very highly nutritious. Plants, on the other hand, use toxins to defend themselves, while animals can run away or fight back. So that's their defense. So you can eat meat, no problem. Even herbivores opportunistically eat smaller animals when they can, but you can only eat certain plants if you have the defenses against those toxins, because otherwise they can be very harmful to you, and that's something that we have really, really lost sight of, even though we've known that for thousands of years.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's so much there to hit on and go over. The one piece that I actually found super interesting that I feel like, as you said, is propagated so much, and that's what confused me for a long time was the blue zones and how they would talk about these blue zones. Again, I've been to areas, like I've been to Japan, and like you said, I went and I ate at these places and I've seen all these healthy people. I was eating cartilage and I was eating all of these different types of animal-based foods. And so I was just kind of like there, kind of confused, because this was well after my whole vegan stout of trying to be healthy. And all of these people in Japan who are more fit and they don't work out as much, they seem happier, even though that's kind of debatable with their, suicide epidemic, but I think that's a different piece. But again, it's just very interesting to look at so many of the pieces around the world that are eating more nose to tail, and they're all doing physically better. With that being said, though, it's the epidemiology studies. You said that, so essentially that's just a questionnaire, because I feel like most of the studies people are throwing at each other are a lot of these just questionnaires that are just kind of based off of the hope of, hey, you answer this question, this targeted question, which also doesn't answer 50 million other pieces about your lifestyle, where you've come from, what you've done. Can you kind of expand on that piece a little bit more?
Yeah, a lot. So nutritional epidemiology is probably one of the weakest forms of scientific endeavor. You can't even really call it scientific because there's nothing rigorous about it. It was really championed by a guy named Professor Walter Willett, who's the head of sort of nutritional sciences, and I think that in the School of Public Health, over the Chan School of Public Health over at Harvard. And so he's worked very closely with the Seventh-day Adventists. They both have their names on a lot of different studies. Marketing pieces, that's basically what they are. And basically what it is say, okay, we'll give you a survey and we'll ask you, all these questions about what you eaten basically in the last year. And then we sort of ask health questions and health questionnaires and things like that. So a lot of stuff is self-reported, right? So you're going to get a lot of it wrong. People can just flat out lie, and it's inherently inaccurate. And then you can manipulate the data any way you want to get any answer that you want. And that's what that's what's been said for hundreds of years. I know Mark Twain sort of popularized it, which was there's three kinds of lies. There are lies, there are damn lies, and there are statistics, right? So they use these statistics to warp your perception of what's happening. So some of them would be just surveys. Some of them there's other epidemiology where you take statistics, hospital statistics. So an example of epidemiology, there's three examples of this. One was from UCLA in 2009. They looked at 130 plus thousand people who'd had a heart attack in America. And they found that of those 130 plus thousand people who had a heart attack, I think it was around 73% had low or ideal LDL cholesterol levels, right? So, I mean, that should tell you right there. I mean, you're actually less likely to have a heart attack if you had what they consider high LDL cholesterol. And about that same number of people had what we would consider low HDL. So HDL being low was actually a much stronger predictor of heart attack than high LDL, right? In fact, high LDL was not a predictor. It was not even associated. There was actually sort of an inverse relationship. And so that's epidemiology. So you're looking at these statistics and you're sort of looking at this big population-wide sort of survey sample. It can be flawed, and your interpretation of it can be different as well. Of course, the conclusion by the authors was, well, obviously, what we call ideal is obviously not low enough. We need it even lower, right? Yeah. Which is a bit funny. But there were two other studies that I know of that were like that with similar sized patient samples. And one of them followed people up for 3 years after that. And so nearly 150,000 people who had heart attacks. And then instantly you have a heart attack, whatever your LDL is, get it lower. You're on statins, you're changing your diet, you're doing all these sorts of things to get it lower. Even if it's low, you're getting it lower. And they found that the people that went from so-called high LDL cholesterol to low, or maintained a low LDL cholesterol, were twice as likely to die within those 3 years of follow-up. So, even the epidemiology isn't lining up with their ideas. There's 3 randomized controlled trials with thousands of patients that gave polyunsaturated fats like vegetable oils, seed oils, to patients to lower their LDL and to see what happened with their heart attacks and stroke rates. And they did indeed lower LDL, and lo and behold, and as a result, more people died of heart attacks and strokes, right? So you lower the LDL and more people died of heart attacks and strokes. So that's a randomized controlled trial. That's actually, top shelf information. That's an experimental trial. You're changing one variable and you're seeing what happens, right? And it killed a lot of people, which is why they buried it. And we didn't actually see this for decades because the authors who were then confronted with this later on said, yeah, well, there was nothing wrong with the study. We just weren't really happy with the results, so we didn't publish it. Which is pretty nasty because, I mean, think about how many people died in that time trying to desperately lower their cholesterol and harming themselves. Your hormones are made out of cholesterol. Your brain is made out of cholesterol. Your bile is made out of cholesterol. Every cell in your body is made out of cholesterol. The cell membranes of your cells are a lipid bilayer of cholesterol molecules. So cholesterol is an extremely important molecule, and yet they just let these people languish in the thought that it was killing them, that their own body, which makes cholesterol, dietary cholesterol, doesn't really affect your serum cholesterol. And so you're making basically poison to your own body, apparently. And so they're just desperately trying to lower that, and you're getting a lot of health issues because of that. So that's the kind of studies that you need. You need those high-level studies, epidemiology studies. They're fraught with problems, but even then, you have better designed epidemiology studies, like looking at population statistics and who gets sick and while they're dying and all that sort of stuff. Much better than the surveys. There's something called the nurses study, which is one that Walter Willett does. And it's multi-year follow-up on these nurses. And, speaking to some of the people that are in this study, they say, okay, yeah, once a year you get an email and you just, click on this thing and it just basically says, yeah, what'd you eat last year? and you have to try to remember every meal that you had in the last year. Like obviously that's not going to happen. Instead of saying, hey, keep track of your meals going forward, just keep a log in this electronic journal, and I mean that would be real data, and that would be epidemiology, but it would be a hell of a lot better than a retrospective survey about what you think you may have eaten
Yeah.
in the last calendar year. Um, there's a lot of these things, and that's what's mostly done in nutritional sciences. And I think it's mostly done in nutritional sciences because it's mostly done by people with vested interest in getting the wrong answer in nutritional sciences.
Yeah. And again, it's you get onto the online space, the media space, and it's so divisive. It's so back and forth. And obviously I've seen, you kind of push back and forth with some people because I feel like food for some reason, at least as of right now, food is so tribal, it's wild.
Mm,
And I don't
yeah.
even, I don't care to get into, like some of the drama that you've dealt with because I could only understand how annoying that is. When
Yeah.
again, all you're trying to do is show another way that could benefit someone else. And I think,
Yeah.
again, the beauty to what I've recognized and again, a lot of other people is how it can not just change, a skin problem or, IBS. It like genuinely can change your life on how you see, your mental health and how you go about everything that kind of surrounds your diet. I do want
Mhm.
to bring up because I have someone very close to me that is dealing with something quite intense as in
Mm,
ALS. Have you
yeah.
found, yeah, so it's like then you're dealing with very aggressive neurological disease there. Have you found any sort of, dietary change that's helped? Because one thing that we started noticing was the holistic side, right? Because the medical side goes, hey, you've got 2 to 4 years. We're trying to find some drugs, but you're fucked.
Mm,
And then
yeah.
the other side of that, the holistic side is like, hey, we've had remissions. We've had people make big changes. You've got to like detoxify everything. But it kept going towards less and less processed foods. And we were, having the conversation yesterday, 2 days ago of like, hey, weirdly enough, things start pushing me towards more of a carnivore diet. And I'm like,
Mm,
liver's propped up and then more meat's propped up. And you're like, hey, like, at some point you're gonna see that like you're trying to take out all toxins. Let that be you're trying to take out glyphosate, these phytotoxins that
mm,
might be like actually affecting you over the long term. I think that's one thing that I would always get like kind of attacked at or made fun of was like, oh yeah, like my kale's got phytotoxins.
mm,
And it's like, hey, if you punch a wall once, it might hurt a little bit, but if you keep doing it every single day, you're gonna ruin your hand. And like I think
yeah.
it's the concept, or maybe a stock is a better kind of concept there, but it's a long term investment of ruining your health. And so I guess the long roundabout question there was, have you found that carnivore has played into a lot of neurological stuff such as ALS?
So definitely a lot of neurological issues, and there are a lot of studies showing this. People say, well, we don't have studies on the carnivore diet, and of course we do. It's actually the most robustly studied diet on earth is the ketogenic diet. And a ketogenic diet, what is that? It just means no carbohydrates, right? But what do you replace carbohydrates with? You replace with fat and protein. Well, where does the fat and protein come from? It comes from meat. And that's the thing. You could technically do this with a vegetarian diet, but it's almost next to impossible to get all the nutrients and energy that you'd need. You'd be having to drink canola oil, basically to try to get enough energy. And it's just not, it just doesn't happen, right? So none of those studies used a plant-based ketogenic diet. It was all animal-based ketogenic diet. So it was very clean, no processed foods. They cut out all this other garbage, and it was high animal fat, high animal protein, high meat diet, and with a side salad. So it's carnivore light. A carnivore diet is a ketogenic diet. So anything that's done with these ketogenic diets is absolutely applicable to the carnivore diet, and someone following a carnivore diet. It's even cleaner because you're cutting out all these phytotoxins and different sorts of things. You're getting it stripped down to just the nutrients that you need and nothing else. And some people have to do that. People with autoimmunity and other sorts of issues, they really can't handle any plant toxins or anything, or glyphosate or any of these sorts of things. It really triggers them. And so they have a salad and bang, their rheumatoid arthritis flares up, or their Crohn's flares up, and they have 30 bouts of bloody diarrhea for the next 3-4 days until this stuff gets out of their system. They really can't handle this stuff. And neurologically, first of all, we have thousands of studies on ketogenic diet. So carnivore light, carnivore with a side salad. We have thousands of high-level studies, interventional trials, not this epidemiology bullshit. We have actual interventional trials where we've changed a variable, we've added something in, we say, hey, what happens here? So for mental health, reversing schizophrenia in people at Harvard, right? And reversing autoimmunity, reversing diabetes. The best treatment that we found so far for Alzheimer's is a ketogenic diet, a high-fat, meat-based ketogenic diet. It was better than every medication ever trialed for Alzheimer's, and people have been rehabbing people and getting them out of nursing homes and getting them home again by doing this now. Traumatic brain injuries, I mean, that's been shown to be dramatically improved by ketogenic diets. Concussions as well. If you are in a state of ketosis, in a state of nutritional ketosis, when you get a concussion, you will have a much, much better outcome, much less neuroinflammation, much less damage to your brain from that subsequent swelling of the brain. And you'll have a much better recovery. So we have a lot of these studies. We have patients that are now reversing MS, multiple sclerosis, and other sorts of damage to their nerves. I've seen, working in neurosurgery, I've seen just dramatic improvements in people's neurological health when they've had stable neurology. They've had some horrible, sciatica sort of pain. We've decompressed the spine. There's nothing more that we can do. The nerve is just permanently damaged, and they're just in chronic pain, and they're just on the pain team now, and they're just getting injections and medications, and that's it. That's their life. And then all of a sudden they change their diet, and 2 months later they're off all the opiates and all the meds, and they're walking around playing with their kids, right? Dramatic difference. And so a lot of that is things that I've noticed in my practice, but that's what really matters. You have a study that tells you, hey, might be a good idea for you to apply this to yourself or your patient. And then you say, okay, I'm going to do that. But the only thing that matters is, does it work for you? And it doesn't work for my patient. It's like, well, but the study said so. So, you're lying or something like that. It's just like, no, it doesn't matter. And so what these studies do is they help guide your approach to medicine as a doctor, or to leading your life as a patient. The only thing that matters is the anecdote, the N of 1. Does it work for you? And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing this works for people. And so, my doctor says that I shouldn't do this. Okay, did it work for you? Yes, it does. Well, then don't worry about it, right? I mean, that's the important thing, is your health is getting better objectively. You're reversing these diseases. And so we are seeing this a lot. Hopefully we will get more and more studies out, but there's already quite a number out showing neurological improvement in a lot of maladies. ALS is very uncommon, and thankfully. And so I've only come across a few cases of people with ALS, but of those people who have gone on a carnivore diet, really strict, just red meat and water and just nothing else, they at least have reported improvements in their symptomatology. How much of that is just their health is improving dramatically in other ways, and that's just making them feel better overall? And how much of that is helping their actual ALS? We don't know. I'm very hopeful that this is something that we can suppress, and I don't think there's certainly nothing else that we're doing that's helping anyway. So it's certainly worth a shot, and it's one of those things that's going to help you in 1,000 other ways anyway. So it can make things a lot easier to deal with, and at least make you healthier and feel better along the way. And I have seen a few people improve. I've seen a few people improve with Huntington's disease, which here, up until this very moment, we thought that, no, that's just purely genetic. You have that gene, you will get Huntington's. That's it. And maybe not now. Maybe that's something that we can prevent, or maybe even reverse in some people. Some people are getting better. It's early days. We need to see what happens long term, but it's very hopeful. And seeing things like MS heal, and having patients who have gone from being in a wheelchair to then walking and having a normal life and normal neurology, and then on MRI showing a remission and healing of their lesions on MRI. That's not just a subjective improvement. That's not just like, well, I feel better. Okay, well, that's why you're out of the wheelchair, because you just have more energy and you've lost some weight and reverse diabetes. No, it's that those lesions are getting better and the nerves are healing. That's why they're walking. So I'm very hopeful for ALS. It's one of those things I haven't seen enough of. I would love to do something with that, get like some sort of research group, if we were able to get a large amount of ALS patients that we could, get on a carnivore diet. And you don't need even randomized control. I mean, I think that's unethical, honestly, to like compare, because you already know how they're going to go. You already know what's going to happen with ALS. It's going to be bad, right?
Yeah.
So let's put people on just a carnivore diet and see what happens. I would love to do that. I think, just as a complete tangent, but it just crossed my mind. Multiple muscular dystrophy, right? This is a very, very serious issues where, Jerry Lewis would do fundraisers and drivers for, Jerry's kids and all that sort of stuff. I think it was multiple muscular dystrophy. Anyway, muscular dystrophy. Muscular dystrophy exists in cows. And vets have figured out that there are a lot of diseases in cows that actually come from them eating the wrong plants and getting sick from that, or having nutritional deficiencies. So things like big head, big tongue, linked neck, crazy cow syndrome, those are all names for diseases, but they're actually caused by eating plants that harm them. They also get muscular dystrophy, but they figured out that it was from a selenium deficiency in the genetically susceptible. So now that's called nutritional muscular dystrophy. And they call it muscular dystrophy because it's exactly the same as human muscular dystrophy. Has anyone even asked the question that, could this be a nutritional deficiency? I think I'm certainly the first person I've heard asking that question. And so, those sorts of things, they are begging to be answered. Those questions are begging to be answered. So we have to at least try. And so for ALS, that's something that I think we have to try, because nothing else is working.
Yeah. Well, so then with most of your patients, and I think I feel like a lot of people would want to know this anyways, but like when you are changing your diet, that is a fundamental structural change that comes within everything that you do. How do you usually ease someone into the carnivore diet? Or is it just like, hey, cut everything out, let's go to work? How do you kind of change those things?
Well, so the thing is it sort of sells itself when I'm seeing them in my office, because quite often I'll obviously talk to them about all their issues and all their problems. So I'll get a good idea of what's going on and how I can help them. And, to be perfectly honest, it's 95% of what's going to help them is just changing their diet. And that's because 95% of issues that we treat as doctors now, at least 90%, it absolutely comes from diet. There are these non-communicable chronic diseases that makes up 90% of the issues that doctors treat on a day-to-day basis. It accounts for 90% of the deaths in America and Australia, and 74% of the deaths around the world. And those are, again, numbers from the Harvard School of Public Health. And so that's the mainstay of modern medicine, is dealing with these chronic diseases that are purely nutritional. So you talk to them and you find out what's going on with them. And then I always do a deep dive into their blood work. And you're looking for subtle signs, early signs of diabetes, like elevated insulin. So this would be insulin resistance. Even though 10, 15 years before you ever get elevated blood sugar, you'll have elevated insulin, and that's what I consider pre-diabetes, because that's your body trying to compensate for something. And then when it can't compensate for that anymore, and your blood sugar starts rising, that's when things start falling apart. So to me, that's diabetes. And before that, the 15 years before that is pre-diabetes. Not just when your diabetes gets so damn bad, this is an emergency now. It's just the wheels are falling off. Let's stop the bus. And so you look at that, you look at other signs of metabolism like leptin, which makes it very difficult for people to lose weight if they have elevated leptin. Insulin blocks leptin, but also different plant toxins called lectins will also block leptin. Elevated leptin or insulin is very problematic issue as well, because we think of insulin as well, as long as there's enough insulin, we can keep that blood sugar down. That's okay. Well, no, because insulin doesn't just affect blood sugar. It affects over 100 different biochemical processes in your body. And so if your insulin is at a 5, which is where it should be, it's affecting everything at a 5. But you eat a sandwich and some, and some pasta, it's up at a 35. And now it's affecting everything at a 35, right? And then you have insulin resistance, and now it's like you're just fasting, it's at a 14 or at a 20 or at a 45. I had a patient last month who came in with a fasting insulin of 72, right? That should never be that high. It should never be above 9, really. And he was 72. So even fasted, not eating for 24 hours, he was affecting everything in his body at a 72, right? And then he ate and jumps up to what, 102? I don't know. I didn't test that, but it scared me, right? So you look at that, you look at their nutritional status, you look at all these different sorts of things. A lot of nutrients just only come from meat, like B12 and D3. They just don't come from plants at all. You can get D2, but you don't need D2. And you can supplement, but nobody really realizes how much you need to supplement, how much you actually need. So most people are very deficient in B12, but it meets that reference range. And that's a key thing, key distinction there too. Most doctors, you go and get a lot of blood work done, and your blood work all work looks normal, and the doctor says, yeah, you're fine, your blood work looks fine. And he's like, okay, well, I don't feel fine, I feel terrible. It's like, so you're just missing something, like what the hell is going on? That reference range that the labs use, first of all, they're different in every single lab. Why is that? Because they're not reference ranges for optimal health. They're reference ranges for the average person that they have sampled. So every few years they change their reference ranges, and there's the first few thousand people that come in. That is the reference range, right? So they're not even testing healthy people. It's the sick people coming in to get blood tests from their doctor that they say, yeah, that's the reference range. And so these reference ranges are actually going lower and lower and lower for a lot of nutrients and hormones. And obviously that's not good. 70% of Americans are overweight or obese. Over 90% have at least one metabolic disease. So when you're in that range, you're basically comparing yourself to those people that are fat and sick. So that's not what you want. You want to compare yourself to people that are healthy. And so those are reference ranges that I use, and other people in my circles use as well. And so that's a very different thing. So you can go in and say like, oh yeah, or vegan or vegetarian can be like, oh yeah, my B12 is fine. I hear people say that all the time. And in my head, it's like, I bet you're not. I bet it isn't. Because a lot of that B12, a lot of those reference ranges, I've yet to see a reference range that didn't include fully half or more of that reference range as a clear clinical deficiency that can cause demyelination. So in US numbers, 540 or below has been shown to cause demyelination of your nerves. So nerve damage. You can actually get nerve damage and brain damage. And Oxford did a study in 2008 that was quite famous. They found that vegans, after 5 years on MRI, their brain shrank by 5% volume, right? So that's not good. And they thought it was because of their critically low B12. Well, they found their critically low B12, these were UK numbers, so it's a little bit different, was 180 to 190, but their reference range goes down to 130, right? So that's still in the normal range. So in the US numbers, that's probably around 250, 300. Right. And so I would call that Oxford called that a critical deficiency. And I would call that a critical deficiency. But the reference range says that's dead normal, right? And yet you can get nerve damage and brain shrinkage. So that's first and foremost. We just have no idea how sick we are. If doctors actually use reference ranges that denoted good health, everything would just be red. And everyone's just like, oh my God, everything's horrible. And they'd actually have to get off their ass and do something. But now they don't even know that there's a problem, because most doctors don't even realize that those reference ranges are complete and utter garbage. So you take a look at all these bloods, you show that their hormones are all screwed up. You got a 19-year-old whose testosterone is 120 when it should be, upwards of 900. It doesn't, you have a normal doctor say, oh, well, look at that. Your balls don't work. Here you go on TRT for the rest of your life. Right. Or I just go, hey, you know what? Insulin blocks the production of testosterone and growth hormone. Why don't you just cut that out and see how you go? 3 months later, their testosterone is 500. right? So I can use those bloods and I can say, look, these are off and you're sick in these regions and for these reasons. And and I can describe how this relates to the food that they're eating. If they have, it's very easy to show this with insulin and carbohydrates, with the hormone disruption and the diabetes, clearly leptin disturbances and insulin disturbances, and how that affects the rest of the body. But also, the phytoestrogens and hormonal disruptors in plants, as well as the different phytotoxins and lectins that can cause issues with autoimmunity. So if someone has an autoimmune disease or something like that, I just point these things out. So I can use their bloods, I can use their situation to paint a picture, a very clear picture about how the food that they're eating is causing the diseases and the problems that they're having. And so it's actually not that hard of a sell. And then I sort of talk them around. Not everybody goes for it. Most of them do. And most of them will at least try it. Most of them will at least cut out the junk food and try to cut out the carbs and try to eat more meat and more fatty meat. Everyone will do that I've found. I have one lady who's religiously vegetarian because she's Indian, but even she is cutting out a lot of this crap and adding in a lot more eggs because she's allowed to have eggs and ghee and things like that. So, and that's improved her health dramatically. So it's actually not that hard. And then when you put them on this and they lose a significant amount of weight, not everybody does, but most people do right away, and long term everyone will, by and large, and their hormones improve dramatically, their health improves dramatically, their autoimmunity goes away, their blood's all improved. We check it again in 2 months, and all these things have changed in the ways that I said they would if they changed their diet in that way. And they just say, yeah, I'm sold. I want to do that, and they feel a lot better. And there's that N of one study. It doesn't matter what some study or survey says, from some nurses halfway around the world who lied on their survey paper. What matters is what happens to you right here and now. Just to quickly touch on what you said before, you said how diet is so tribal right now. It is crazy how that is. People get incensed if you disagree with them about diet. But it's really unilateral. It's only in one direction. Like, I don't care what people eat. I want people to be healthy, and so I want them to understand this. But if they don't choose to do that, I have no dog in that fight. I just don't care. I don't think smoking is a good idea. I don't think drinking is good for you either. But if someone knows that and knows that smoking and drinking are bad for them, and like, yeah, you know what, I enjoy it, I'm going to do it. Go for it. I don't care. But I don't want them drinking and smoking, but they think it's good for them. I actually read this today. The guys on the Tour de France, back from like the 1920s to the 1980s, before it started changing, started actually sort of thinking about this a bit more. They would drink a buttload of wine during the Tour de France, and they would all smoke cigarettes in the morning because they thought that it got their heart pumping and their lungs opening up. That they thought they thought that smoking was going to open up their lungs before they started crushing. And they were doing like single gear bikes on dirt roads. I mean, it was just nasty what these guys had to go through. They ate a ton of meat though, and but they also smoked and drank like it was going out of business. But they thought that this was beneficial to their health. So I have no problem if you want to smoke and drink. I really couldn't care less. But I don't want people to smoke and drink because they're told that they should, right? And so I just want people to understand that, hey, look, vegetables aren't the bee's knees, and meat is definitely not bad for you. So I just want people to know that. But the people on the other side, they get pissed. They're like, how can you say that? They're trying to say that, no, you have to eat this way. There's no exception. And I think a lot of those people are either ideologically driven or they're being paid. A lot of these people are on social media being paid on TikTok and Instagram. A lot of people got caught being paid to say that the aspartame, the fake sugar sweetener, that was safe because the WHO classified it as a potential carcinogen, and FDA tried to fight against that. But there's corporate capture there and the WHO. So gosh knows how the WHO got away with saying that. But the sugar companies and the processed food companies, they just started dumping out millions of dollars to pay people to just attack people online and come out with videos saying, no, aspartame is so great. Look at these studies. Yeah, look at these studies made by the people selling you aspartame. My God, I'm convinced,
Yeah.
And And so they got, some of these people didn't say that these were paid ads, and they got caught doing that. Some people did, and other people didn't get caught, And so a lot of these things are being paid. You have these mukbang videos where these people are being paid to just gorge themselves on food, and they're getting, mega views on TikTok and things like that. They're being paid by the processed food companies to just gorge yourself like an animal. And a lot of these people are dying.
Yeah.
I mean, they're actually killing themselves with the food that they're eating. It's really, really sad what they're doing. So I think that a lot of this stuff is tribal, but it's being tribal. It's been made tribal by these multi-trillion-dollar multinational companies that are really fighting tooth and nail to protect their investment and keep us eating things that make us sick, keep us sick, and keep us forced to buy medicine that at least mitigates that illness and disease, and we have to be on it for the rest of our life. So, but you see people doing carnivore, they're happy for anybody to do anything they want. It's just like, look, I just want to do what I want to do. I just want to eat meat. Like, why are you just getting in my business about it?
Yeah.
Do what you want to do. I don't care.
Yeah.
But they do care. They really care.
Yeah.
Most of the people that follow me on social media and on YouTube, though, they were former vegans and vegetarians who ended up getting very sick, or at least seeing the line, going like, yeah, this doesn't make sense, and it's not doing what people say it's doing, and I'm going to try it. And I get messages every day. I mean, a lot of messages every day from people that they're like, thank God I changed this, because it's like, as soon as I started eating meat, I just, my whole life changed. And these are people that are high functioning people. There's one guy who was a professional basketball player. I won't say his name, but he was like plant-based for like 10 years. And he said he was performing at a high level, feeling really good. He ended up injuring out. And then he subsequently went carnivore. And he said as soon as he started eating meat, his life changed, because he was having these subtle health issues that are getting worse and worse and worse. And eventually he started eating meat again, cut out the plants, and he was just completely changed his life. So, you see that all the time. And, but yeah, there's a big ideology involved. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people being paid to make it tribal and attack people online.
Yeah. Well, I feel like some of the arguments I feel like might need to be deconstructed. And maybe just the main one that I hear about that you probably get thrown at you all the time is the dietary fiber. And maybe you could tell me if I'm wrong there, if that is the biggest one, or if you hear that it's like the vitamins and nutrients from plants that you wouldn't be getting from steak. I don't know which one you hear more, but I feel like just explaining that, at least on the dietary fiber, I hear that so much. What's faulty behind that whole idea?
Yeah, that's a big one. The nutrients are a big one, and cholesterol. Just saying
And
that
cholesterol.
you're going to die if you eat meat and you get cholesterol. But those are sort of three very common ones. And but fiber always makes it there, because it's been driven into our heads that we have to have fiber. But that didn't actually start until the 1980s. No one was really pushing out, we should eat a bunch of fiber until the 1980s, really. And that's when everyone started getting constipated, because we stopped eating fat. So we told in the late 70s, early 80s to stop eating fat. Fat actually drives your digestion. Fat is what keeps your stool soft and easy to pass. You have a limited capacity to absorb fat based on the amount of bile that you have. And once you exhaust the amount of bile that you have, you can't really absorb fat. It's very difficult. You can absorb a small amount, mostly medium chain triglycerides, MCTs. The rest of it just goes out. And so, people say, oh, you don't want to overeat fat. And I was like, yeah, you can't really. It's not really physiologically possible to overeat fat, because you cannot absorb it. So you can eat it, but it's not going to go in your body. Just like you can eat all the fiber you want. It's not going to actually get absorbed into your body. It's just going to go right out, right? And so I don't think our body's making a random amount of bile, and we have to micromanage it. And we have to decide over our silly body that doesn't know what it's doing, how much fat we actually need. We have no idea how much fat we need. Your body knows how much fat we need. That's why it makes a very expensive resource called bile that's very energy dependent and resource dependent. It costs money to your body to make this stuff. So it's not just going to do it for no reason. So when we stopped eating fat, everyone started getting constipated, and they started saying, yeah, you gotta eat more fiber, because the peristalsis, it will help peristalsis and move this along. In fact, that hasn't been shown to do that. In experimental data and randomized controlled trials, it was shown that people with symptomatic constipation, they split them up into 4 groups. One ate the same amount of fiber as it came in with. One increased fiber, one decreased, and one eliminated fiber. And it stratified exactly the opposite of what we've been told that it would. The people that stayed the same, but the people that increased fiber actually got worse and had worse constipation. People who ate less fiber improved. And people who eliminated fiber, all of them eliminated all symptoms. All symptoms went away, right? And so that's completely the opposite of what we've been told. Fiber was originally championed by a guy named Dr. Burkitt, who's a very famous British surgeon. I'm pretty sure he's British. And so Burkitt's lymphoma is named after him, okay? So he was in Africa, I forget which part, and he was just sort of noticing this tribe had very large bowel motions. And he thought it was because of, the fibrous diet that they ate. They had a lot of fibrous sort of foods included in their diet. And he also noticed that they didn't have high rates of colorectal cancers. And so he just said, must be the fiber. No experiment. He didn't even do an epidemiological survey. He just sort of looked at that and just made this relationship that I bet that's what that is. And unfortunately, that's about 60% of medicine is these best guesses at the time from someone influential enough to get this published or to get people listening to him. And then there's no other competing theory. And so it just gets out there and just gets repeated and repeated and repeated until it just ends up getting in textbooks and being taught to the next generations of doctors. That was it. It was just, I bet that's it. He thought that it was probably the reduction in colorectal cancer. There are no studies showing that fiber reduces colon cancer or it reduces your risk for colon cancer. That was it. It was just his guess, right? And it wasn't based on any experimental data. It wasn't observed on even any observational data. It was just, he just sort of looked at it and said, but he didn't track any numbers. He didn't see how much fiber they're eating, how much colon cancer they're getting. He just said, big turds, eat a lot of fiber, low rates of colon cancer. I bet that's what it is. You're in the middle of Africa. How do you know what their cancer rates are? They don't have access to medical care. You don't even know what sort of diseases they have. And so, that's the thing. And that's so much of medicine is based on that. It's not a science. You can apply scientific principles to medicine, but oftentimes you don't. Oftentimes they do things like Dr. Burkitt did. Fiber is not necessary. It was never even suggested as necessary until Dr. Burkitt, and then in the 1980s when we said, this will help with constipation. And then it's all of a sudden, 20 years later or 30 years later, it's classified as an essential nutrient. Essential meaning that if you don't get it in your diet, you will die. You will get a deficiency. What is a fiber deficiency exactly? What does that look like? Niacin deficiency, that's pellagra. You get things like scurvy. You get all these other sorts of deficiencies. Rickets from vitamin D deficiency. What's the fiber deficiency exactly? Not having constipation, that's the deficiency, I guess. So it's there's nothing that you actually need. It's certainly not an essential nutrient. You can't even break it down. You don't get any nutrients from it. You don't absorb anything useful from it. So how can it be an essential nutrient if it's not even a nutrient in the first place, right? So that doesn't make sense. So this is again just being pushed out there nonsensically. And why did we not need fiber before 1986? Why was that the only time that we needed this? And we had a problem that only fiber could solve, but it only showed up in the 1980s. So what kind of sense does that make? There are studies also showing that increased fiber consumption and increased number of bowel motions per day, per week, that is strongly associated with diverticulosis, which is colon disease. It's colon failure. You get these outpouchings and they sort of diverticulate, little sort of bubbles get sort of stretched out on the colon, and those can get infected. That's diverticulitis that can kill you, or you have to get that part of your intestine removed. And that was not it was a study with over 2,000 patients with colonoscopies and looking for diverticuli, and they found no association with constipation, no association with meat, no association with fat, only associated with more fiber and more bowel motions a week. And there was another study with, I believe, around 2,000 patients, and they had a low fiber group and a high fiber group, and they followed these guys, and the high fiber group actually died of heart attacks and stroke more often than the low fiber group. So it's like, okay, what's going on? A lot of the studies that look at fiber, and because I've had this discussion with people that push for this sort of diet, as far as doctors and researchers are concerned, they say, well, look at what about this meta-analysis showing how great fiber is? And it's like, okay, well, a meta-analysis is a conglomeration of supposedly similar studies that you can then look at and statistically sort of put them all together and make it into one big study and say, hey, what was the outcome here? And so they said, okay, fiber is good. Fiber can help lower blood pressure, for instance, in one of these meta-analyses. But the thing is if you have poorly designed, poorly controlled, or epidemiological studies, it doesn't matter if it's a meta-analysis. It's because you're using junk parts. So the saying is junk in, junk out. It's still junk. Maybe a meta-analysis, but it's junk. It's a junk meta-analysis. And that's what these are. So people look at meta and say, oh, it's a meta-analysis, highest level of evidence. And they don't actually look at the studies in the meta-analysis to see if they were worth looking at all. I do. So I look at that. So they're saying, look at this meta-analysis. Look at the conclusion they drew. It helps with blood pressure. Okay, let's look at the studies. So most of these were, healthy user bias. So people that ate more sort of fiber in their diet. They're also eating less processed food. They're eating less junk. They're drinking less alcohol. They're smoking less. They're doing all that sort of stuff. There's a healthy user bias to that. So those are pretty much useless. They're not comparing people like me who don't eat any fiber because I only eat meat, and people that eat more fibrous fruits and vegetables. They're comparing people that eat a junk food diet that doesn't have fiber in it, but it's still plant-based garbage, and compared to a whole food plant-based approach that has more fiber. So, you're not comparing like for like, so that's not really useful. And there's all these confounders and healthy user bias. But then the ones that actually did sort of an intervention, they actually just gave people a fiber tablet, right? They just gave them excess fiber. First of all, it wasn't carnivores giving a fiber diet, a fiber pill. It was, the average person eating the average diet being given a fiber tablet. So there's already that. But then there were some things that actually showed, okay, the people given a fiber tablet actually did decrease their blood pressure a bit in statistically significant ways. Sometimes not statistically significant, but sometimes they were. And okay, fine. Okay, how much did they lower their blood pressure by? It was like average of 1.5 points. Right, so you got giving people like a blood pressure a fiber pill, and they go from 170 down to 168.5. It's like, I'm sorry, I'm not that impressed. Like, that doesn't actually matter as far as a clinical outcome. Yes, it does technically lower the blood pressure, and yes, you can technically publish that and say you're doing real science, but you're kidding yourself. That's not an appropriate medical intervention. Then people say, oh, meta-analysis shows that added extra fiber lowers blood pressure. It's like, okay, not really, not to any appreciable degree and not to any clinically significant amount. And, then you have to, and then there's other studies that show that people that eat more fiber or even have a fiber intervention tend to have lower blood sugar. Okay, that's great. But you have to think about the mechanism. This doesn't get absorbed into the body. Again, it's not a nutrient. So what does it do? It's physical tangles and barriers. It actually makes sort of like a physical lattice and a barrier to the nutrients. So your enzymes can't get to the food in your stomach and small intestine. And then the digested food, if it gets digested, can't actually make it to the walls. There's the physical tangles of fiber around there that are blocking it. So there's some estimates. Dr. Robert Lustig from UCSF wrote a book called Metabolical, and he's written books of that nature, basically shouting from the rooftops how toxic sugar is and fructose is. And he talks about this, and he references some few studies showing that you can actually block out up to 30% absorption in the gut. And so, that's he's saying, oh, that's great. So if you're eating fruit, this is going to block out a lot of the fructose that's coming in, or you're eating a lot of fiber, that's going to block out the fructose and the sugar coming in. That's better. And then, yeah, that's better, but you're still absorbing 70% of it, right? So you don't want that necessarily. And, but what does that mean? You're also blocking out 30% of the absorption of the good things that you do want. So if you're only eating things that you do want, that are good for you, like meat, you eat them with fiber, it's gonna delay out 30% of that absorption. But for the case of these fiber studies, it blocks out 30% absorption of your carbohydrates. Okay, well, that's how it lowers blood sugar. You're just not absorbing as much blood sugar. Well, if you just didn't, or dietary sugar and to raise your blood sugar, if you just didn't eat sugar in the first place, it just wouldn't go up at all. And also you're blocking out the absorption of the things that you want. So you have to sort of look at all of these things from the holistic point of view, from just a big picture point of view. You can't get lost and myopic and get lost and lose sight of the forest for the trees. Fiber doesn't do anything you need. Like if you're eating a high octane crap processed food garbage diet, sure, preventing 30% of that from getting in your body, probably a great idea. But if you're not doing that, then no, it's not benefiting you. In fact, it's harming you.
Yeah. So then because again, like it was a journey for me to get to like where I am in my diet. How do you have people transition into the diet? Do you start with eggs? Do you start with cutting out obviously this would be a big one, but like cutting out sodas, and is it just water? Can you drink coconut water? Like, what does that look like? What's the perfect carnivore diet look like for you, and how do you get there?
Well, I think optimally is just fatty meat and water.
Okay.
Ruminant animals like red meat, like the beef, lamb, goat, venison sort of animals, ones that have a rumen, the complex foregut that ferments and breaks down the food that they get in before they absorb it, as opposed to the monogastrics like pigs, chicken, fish, and humans, where the food goes in, we sort of break it down, but then we just absorb it full form before it gets fermented and broken down. And then our liver detoxifies it subsequently. But it's in your body. So if you're feeding like the pigs and chicken and fish, things that they don't eat in the wild, they're not going to be able to contend with the plant toxins or the glyphosates and all these other sorts of things as well as they would their normal food. And so that's going to get into their body, and that can be a bit worse. And quite often they'll have very high linoleic acid, which is quite harmful. In fact, one of those studies that I mentioned that killed a lot of people by replacing saturated fat with plant oils. One was directly with very high linoleic acid. Most seed oils, most plant oils, very high linoleic acid. So they replaced saturated fat with linoleic acid, and just people started dying more of heart attacks and strokes. Right, so you don't really want linoleic acid. So even if you're doing a carnivore diet, you can get too much linoleic acid if it's a factory farmed pig, chicken, and fish. So ideally would be wild mammoth, right? That would be the real ideal, what we've been eating up until the megafauna died out sort of 15,000 years ago. But for what we have now, just very fatty ruminant animals that are like regeneratively raised, grass-fed and finished. They objectively have more micronutrients. They objectively have less toxins, and they're just healthier all around. Have a better omega-3 profile, omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acid profile. But not everybody has access to that or can afford that. And so what I think is ideal for the majority of people is the red meat. But just grain finished. It's like gold. It's like the Olympics. I think of it that way. Gold medalists being the regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cows, right? Yep. But grain-fed is silver. And while silver lost to gold, that's really sad. But silver medalists also beat everybody else on Earth, and so that's really not a bad position to be in. And so if you don't have access to that sort of meat, you don't have to break the bank or do anything. It doesn't have to be perfect to have amazing results and reverse very significant diseases. And other than that, if you tolerate them, eating pig, eggs, chicken, fish, if you enjoy those sorts of things, basically eating whatever meat that you enjoy, tastes good to you, that you have access to and you can afford. That's the main thing. If you have autoimmunity, you really need to stick to red meat and water. And so I don't use coconut water or anything like that. I avoid anything with sugar as well. I think it's as important what not to eat as what to eat. So I have specific rules for myself that I think are optimal, and that I sort of mention to my patients. But again, they can do what they want. I'm saying, look, this is what I think is ideal, and you can add in things here and there if you feel that that's what you want. But if you're having problems with it, this is where you can go. So my rule on what not to eat for myself is no plants or mushrooms, no sugar or any sweeteners, and nothing artificial. And that goes for sauces, seasonings, and drinks as well. And that's what I felt the best on. That's what I've seen my patients do the best on. When they're transitioning, I tell them all these sorts of things. A lot of them are just like, "Yep, screw it. I'm throwing all that crap out now. I don't want to eat poison," and so they're pretty motivated. But if people are just like, "Oh, I'm really just not there yet," like, can we like stepwise do this, or maybe just can I get a halfway sort of measure? It's like, sure, just eat more meat. Eat more meat, eat more fatty meat. Stop eating any processed food or junk food, anything out of a box or a bag. Don't eat it. Cut out the sugars, cut out the sugary drinks, cut out the alcohol, right? Try to cut out carbs. Try to get down, off the carbs, everything like that. Eat whole foods. Eat a lot of meat. Meat's the main focus. Get a lot of fat. Fat's not your enemy. It's your best friend. It's what your brain is made out of. It's what your hormones are made out of. And so don't be shy of that. Eat a lot of meat. Concentrate on that. Cut out the sugar and carbs, processed foods, and the alcohol. And you're already going to get massive improvements. Try to get low oxalate foods. Try to avoid high lectin foods like beans, seeds, legumes, things like that. Try to avoid nightshades like potatoes, tomatoes, eggplants, peppers. If you're going to have fruit, try to avoid ones that are very sweet, and also only get fruit that is vine ripened or tree ripened, because they have far more defense chemicals when they're picked green, because they have far more defense chemicals when the seed isn't ready yet, because they want to protect it. They don't want anything messing with it. And so if you pick it when it's green, it's separated from the tree. Those toxins are in there. They can't escape. And so when they ripen, toxins are still in there. And at least with tomatoes, we've had studies showing that if you pick them green, even if you ripen them in the box, they don't lose any of the toxins. So they have far higher toxic load when you pick them green. Good luck getting a piece of fruit from the store that hasn't been picked green. They just have to travel properly. Avocados, they have 4 times the number of oxalates in them when picked green, and multiple times more of the other issues as well. So just be mindful of that. If you have a fruit tree and you want some fruit, that's your business, but at least you can pick it ripe, and that's going to be less of an issue. So, there's definitely gray areas, even just getting rid of processed food and just eating more fatty meat, you're going to improve your health. Cut out, sugar and carbs, it's going to be even better. And you sort of keep breaking these things down a bit more. And, like you said with, your friend, that we're talking about sort of how do we cut these things out to deal with ALS, you're just sort of going closer and closer to a carnivore diet. That tends to be what people do. They just sort of cutting a little bit more out and a little bit more out. A lot of people go ketogenic. They find a lot of health benefits from that, but then they're just sort of not quite as good as they maybe could be. And they start cutting out a little bit more. And then they just try meat and they go like, I had no idea. This was like next level good. And so a lot of people do transition from keto to carnivore. It's a natural progression because the ideas are already there. Meat's good, fat's good, and cholesterol was a lie. And carbs are can do things to your body. There are things that you eat that can harm you, like carbohydrates and sugar, and they can disrupt your metabolism and cause problems. So the concept is already there, and then you explain to them about these plant toxins, that there's more than one bad thing on earth. And they're like, yeah, I get that. That makes sense. They look into it more and they're like, okay, I'll give it a try. And they're like, wow, this is amazing. I feel great. And so they naturally go that way. But, if you could sort of jump, head first into it, I think that's a very reasonable thing to do. You strike when the iron's hot. You sort of say, yeah, I'm going to give this a try, and just go for 30 days and see how you feel. Most people have fantastic results. Some people have a bit of a teething issues. I make videos on how to sort of go through some of the more common types of teething issues that people can sort of navigate and get through. But eventually everyone improves. Everyone improves dramatically, and most people improve dramatically pretty quickly on. So once they start seeing that and seeing their improvements, and then they start experimenting and sort of like have something else. Oh, well, salad, that's not going to hurt me, or I'll have some peach or something like that, and they just feel wretched for the next few days. Like, I had no idea. And I've seen so many people say that it's like, I had no idea how good I felt until I stopped feeling this good, because I started eating other things again, and it was just like, yep, no, 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 I'm not doing that again. I'm not eating this stuff anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like what I try to tell people, for me at least, is like, I don't bring it into my house. And so I kind of, again, I follow more of the animal based. And so
Mhm.
everything that's in my house, I feel like would fit that perfect description. But outside of it, then I give a little bit, and I think that's fine. And so I feel like in my mind, and maybe you would agree with this, it's like we're trying to find a consistent like
Mhm.
diet, and it's even hard to call it a diet, but it's like a consistent way of eating that won't affect you.
Mhm.
Because okay, yeah, every now and then it's fine. You're not going to die by like one slice of pizza. You're not going to feel great, and I can attest for that. You don't,
Mhm.
you never really feel that good after. But again, it's like, if you look at it, how can we consistently eat Monday through Saturday? You give on one of those nights, and then again you rebuy all your groceries Sunday, and then you reflush and go ahead. But what I try to tell people is like, as consistently as possible, try to
Mhm.
find that balance of what that perfect diet is in your house. And then when you leave, it's like when we travel, I'm screwed. Like I have to like manage and like flush, because I don't get to have like the diet that I necessarily want or like. And so there has to be that give. And so again, it's been very interesting to kind of watch and see these changes, for at least in my case, for me. But I just wanted to end with one more concept or idea. I don't know if this is going to be kind of a long-winded answer for you or not, but
Probably.
it's the idea of
They usually are.
it could, yeah, well, it's beautiful. I love it. But you keep going back to all of these things. You have such a big base of knowledge, and maybe it's because you were forced to, but you have the history, you have the diet, which I feel like most doctors don't have, how to change the diet, and then you have all of these other procedures that you can do and help with. How can we change or fix our medical systems? Because I feel like the school itself is so behind. I feel like even when I look at like the strength and conditioning field, I'm always listening to the best strength coaches talk about how, the textbooks are 5 to 15 years behind. Do you kind of still feel that way, since you're citing studies in the 1800s that might be still be being used now? How do we change that?
Yeah, I think the problem is too is that, like, a lot of the the in date sort of studies are just fraudulent in the first place. They're in date, but they're out of date. And actually, the recommendations before that were the ones that were correct, and the ones that people were doing that actually people got better results with. And so you have to sort of look at all of this. It's like the idea in law, stare decisis. Well, look, we've already just sort of decided this. Someone's ruled on it. That's case law now. We just have to rule on it. And then other jurists will just say, well, no, hold on a second. If it was unconstitutional then, it's unconstitutional now. We rule on it again. We should find it unconstitutional, right? I mean, this is like the very the Dred Scott cases, Board versus Brown, these very famous landmark cases that were decided incorrectly at first, and then came back and said, yeah, no, that's total bullshit. You can't actually do that. You're taking people's constitutional rights away. It's the same idea, So if you have these things, just because we're doing it now and that's the current guidelines, it doesn't mean it's correct, and doesn't mean that we didn't have it better before. And a lot of these guidelines, so there are two people, well, actually, there was a number of people, and two very notable people. One was the head of the editor in chief of the Lancet, which is one of the top medical journals in history, and then the New England Journal of Medicine, again, one of the top medical journals in history. And both of them have independently said that basically you can't trust the scientific literature anymore in medicine. You just can't. It's been completely taken over by industry. It's been completely corrupted. They said that at least half but realistically, more than this, you cannot trust. It is completely fraudulent, and these things have done. They've made conclusions that are completely baseless. They're doing things that can't be replicated in any other study, and they're not even trying half the time. And they've corrupted these things from industry money and all these sorts of things, and or just buried the lead. They could do studies and find that you replace saturated fat with polyunsaturated fat, and it actually kills people, and then they just don't publish it, and they just bury the thing. So they said that you cannot trust this. You cannot trust expert opinion. You cannot trust the guidelines. Most people on the boards that dictate the guidelines are financially or ideologically compromised. The reason that people think that meat causes cancer is because the WHO said so. And they said that processed meat is a carcinogen and that red meat is probably a carcinogen, right? What was the basis for that? The University of Washington in Seattle, they did a massive landmark paper last year, the year before, looking at over 800 studies, and found that a lot of these things that had a weak correlation with meat and cancer, they were just complete garbage. They called them junk studies, junk science, and they were just garbage. And they said the better ones all showed absolutely no connection or correlation between meat and cancer or any other health issue. And in fact, they found no connection with processed meats and cancer or other sorts of issues, and certainly not with unprocessed red meats. So what did the WHO use? They didn't use all 800 studies. They weaned that down to about 30. They cherry-picked the ones that had this very weak correlation, and they were the junk studies that University of Washington described. And that's the ones that said, oh, look at this. Red meat probably causes cancer. Processed meat definitely causes cancer. It was a weak correlation. There was no cause and effect established in any of these studies. One of the people on that board for the WHO, not everyone is corrupt at the WHO, just a lot of them. And the WHO has even said themselves, they're like, listen, 75% of our funding comes with strings attached. So take that for what you will. They've said that, And so one of these guys that were on the board for this particular set of recommendations saw them. He said that he came out subsequently and said this was the most difficult experience he's ever had in his professional career, because he saw these people, they throw out dozens, if not hundreds, of good quality, high level studies that showed absolutely no association with meat and cancer, and certainly not red meat and cancer, in favor of these really crappy, poorly designed junk studies that had a very weak at best correlation between processed meat and cancer. And he called them out on it. He said, listen, all of you guys are either vegans, vegetarians, or our friends, the Seventh-day Adventists, right? He said, you guys need to declare your bias. And they refused, right? And so now the world thinks, oh, the WHO says so it must be true. Well, that's appealing to authority. Just because teacher said so doesn't mean teacher's right. Teacher could be a dumbass, or teacher could be, being paid by someone, right? And so, it's you can't trust the guidelines anymore. Unfortunately, you have to look into this yourself, and you have to sort of, you have to look into the research for yourself. People say do your own research. What does that mean? It just means educate yourself. It means read a damn book. Right? When did that become a bad thing? When did we start telling people, no, you shouldn't educate yourself. You should just sit there like an idiot and just be spoon-fed everything. That's the opposite of what you want to do. Anybody who tells you not to educate yourself is not your friend, and they're trying to hoodwink you. So the studies are out there, the evidence is out there, the data is out there. It just needs to get into the right hands. I didn't do any of these studies myself. I didn't publish these studies. It's not like I'm just doing landmark research. I'm just reading. I just started asking questions. I just started seeing, hold on a second, I've been doing a carnivore diet. I did the carnivore diet for 5 years in my early 20s. I felt like an absolute superhero as a professional athlete. And then immediately after I stopped it, I did not feel nearly as good. And I didn't recognize it at the time, but that is what we were supposed to do. That's our biologically appropriate diet. That's what we've been doing for millions of years. And now we have entire humanity not eating this way, not eating like our biologically appropriate, in our biologically appropriate way. Just like if a panda doesn't, or a gorilla doesn't, or a jaguar doesn't, they're going to get sick. What do they get? They get so-called human diseases. They get all the non-communicable chronic diseases that are the mainstay of modern medicine, but they only get them if they eat the wrong things. This is why there's signs at the zoo that say don't feed the animals. It makes them very sick if they eat something they're not designed to eat. And what do they get sick with? They get all the non-communicable chronic diseases, the so-called human diseases. And they say the food is causing it. Okay, why are we missing this with us, right? So there are studies. I just started asking those questions. Say, okay, well, what do we know? What's in the literature? What has been done? There's thousands and thousands and thousands of studies, high-level studies, interventional trials, meta-analyses of interventional trials and randomized controlled trials showing this stuff. But you know what they don't have is a product at the end of the line. And so they don't have anyone like Pepsi with a $2 billion marketing budget that can go say, awesome, we got this study that says something we like. Let's get it out there. Let's pay a bunch of news outlets to publicize this. Let's get a bunch of commercials going, and let's get a bunch of sales rep going into cater lunches for doctors saying, hey, look at this new study that shows that if you just stop eating carbohydrates, your diabetes goes away and you don't ever need to use medication again, right? There's no product at the end of that, unfortunately. So the studies are there, the science is there, the data is there, the results are there, the real world results are there, because there are doctors who know about this, and it's a growing number of us that are already using that in our practice. And we're treating people and curing people of their diseases that are heretofore thought to be incurable. And that's starting to gain traction. Just in Australia, just this week, they announced that that using a high-fat, meat-based, animal-based ketogenic diet is now going to be the first line treatment for diabetes patients. Fantastic, right? It's now in the guidelines. This is now mainstream medicine for diabetes treatments in Australia. That's amazing. That's a huge accomplishment. So it's starting to move, but it's a lot slower because we don't have the marketing budget that Kellogg's and Nestle and Pepsi and Coke have, or Pfizer does, and Moderna and all these other sorts of things, right? So they have a product at the end of the line, so they can afford to push this out there. Unfortunately for us, it's word of mouth. So the truth will out, but it has to be a grassroots movement. And what will fix the healthcare industry is fixing these non-communicable chronic diseases. Like I said, we're spending about $13 trillion a year just on those top 5, right? That's worldwide. And this is again from the Harvard School of Public Health, that between 2010 and 2030, the opportunity costs, lost opportunity costs, the lost, sick days, and, lost potential earnings that could have been generated in the economy, is estimated to be around $46 trillion in that 20-year time span. And then the costs of early deaths, premature deaths of people, and the consequences that caused, was estimated at around $22 trillion in 2011, and is estimated to go above, I think, around $42 trillion by 2030. So the pharmaceutical companies and just the whole medical establishment gets around $13 trillion a year to treat those 5 non-communicable diseases. But the world is losing far more than that, just in its opportunity costs and early death, and we're paying the trillions of dollars for this treatment. So, that needs to go away. If there's some way of figuring out how to get a product at the end of just dietary sort of interventions, that's going to be able to allow people to say, okay, hey, let's get this information out there. Let's pay reps to get this out there and get this out to doctors. At the moment, it's word of mouth. But it is working. This is, people are having more conversations like this. People like yourself are coming to this and then seeing like, wow, this really made a big difference in my life. You look into it more like, wow, there's actually something here. And now you're sharing it with your circle, and that spreads, right? I was asked to be on 60 Minutes Australia to talk about this, and I knew it wasn't going to be nice, but they lumped me in with all these like charlatans that are just trying to sell supplements and shit like that. Even though I said flat out, "Hey, this is a way to get off medications, and you don't need supplements. You just eat properly." So I was obviously not in that, but people saw that in the episode. We talked for like 3 hours, and they used 5 minutes of our interview. It is what it is, but then it was a decent clip of that. If you had to pick 5 minutes, it wasn't a bad 5 minutes to pick anyway, and so I didn't mind. But a lot of people saw that. They were like, that meat guy's the only one who looks healthy out of all of them, and he's the only one not trying to sell something. And so people did sort of get that. It's starting to be talked about more mainstream because it's just gotten big enough. They have to bring it up in the mainstream, even if they have to lambaste it and try to talk trash about it. But at least they have to talk about it. No press is bad press. And then when people start talking about it, they start seeing like, well, actually, what is this? And they look into it and they see all the people getting better and getting help. And they're like, hold on a second, I have those same problems. And I'm seeing, 500 people just in this chat who've all healed that. Maybe try it. Holy crap, it helped. And then you tell your friends and your family about it. So it's getting out. Cat's out of the bag, right? So I think we're going to get there. And so, but at the moment, it's going to be a grassroots movement. We have to get other doctors and clinicians involved in this. I get messages from people in medical school all the time, or PhD candidates in nutrition all the time saying, hey, I want to do research on the carnivore diet and get a big experiment done for my PhD. So this is happening. People are doing this. But again, that study on the carnivore diet that's going to get out, it's not going to get into the news. No one's going to publicize it. It's going to have to be us. We're going to have to share this out on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube and things like that to get that out there. But until we get that, until we get different people, it's actually interesting. I don't really get into politics, but RFK Jr. is like the only guy I've ever heard talking about this, saying like, hey, we're getting sick. More people are sick and obese than ever before. And it's because we're eating shit and we're getting these toxic exposures to glyphosate and all these different sorts of things in the water and the air and all these sorts of things, and in the food especially. So, that's one politician, but soon it may be more, and people get understanding the importance of this and how impactful it is. I think it's going to start moving, but all we have to do to fix the healthcare system. I mean, think about all those trillions of dollars that we're losing because of this disease, these diseases. It's just those five. That's not autoimmunity or anything else. Alzheimer's. I mean, gosh, how much do we spend on that? It's insane. And just the lives lost and opportunity costs lost are staggering. Let alone the human costs. And so when we get this out there, and people actually start reversing these diseases and they just go away, we are going to flood tens of trillions of dollars back into the economy that can actually be directed in very useful and fruitful ways. And that is your healthcare crisis, those mass trillions that we spend on these non-communicable chronic diseases that make up upwards of 90% of what we treat now. That's growing. It's growing decade by decade, and it's becoming more and more expensive decade by decade. So that is your healthcare problem. That is your healthcare crisis. We can talk about the economics involved in private healthcare, public healthcare, some brand new system that we've never heard of before. But it doesn't matter what system you have. No system is going to hold under the weight of the burden of these chronic diseases. Nothing is going to be able to handle that. So we just need to get this out there to people. It's not in the big companies and corporations' best interest to cure disease. They said, Goldman Sachs said that themselves. That's not what they're aiming to do, right? So we need to do it. We as patients, we as clinicians, we need to get this out there. And so that's what I try to direct this to, is the patients and the clinicians. If we can get some politicians on board, great. And you'd think that would be a hot button item, because like, hey, we can fix the healthcare crisis. We just get people healthy. 90% of problems are out the door, right? So, that at some point will actually start making sense to some politicians. But at the moment, we're just doing this as a grassroots movement, getting patients and especially clinicians involved, because if patients take control of their own health, they're sorted, right? They don't have to have an issue, and they can influence people around them. But if we get doctors and clinicians and nurses and dietitians involved in this, and they're influencing not only their patients but their peers, that they have quite an influence there. So now they can put their patients on a carnivore diet, change their diet up, say, actually, this makes a huge impact. Let's not just keep upping your blood pressure medication and diabetes medication and your insulin. Let's actually address this at a root cause level and get you better. That's happening. And the more that happens, the healthier people are going to become, and this problem goes away. So I think that's the main thing. You have to understand the system they're working in. We're working against a product development market that has trillions of dollars at its disposal to market what it thinks we should do, which is make them money. We don't have the budget on the other side, so we have to do this as a grassroots movement. If someone can figure out how to make this a business, and then we can use that money from that business to start marketing and getting this out to other doctors, great. I'm not business minded in that way. I'm not sort of entrepreneurial in that regard. I haven't thought of anything that could do that. One way you could do it is targeting. Nike did this for a while, which is the healthier you were. Like if you cycled to work, you'd get. This was back in the 90s. You'd get an extra $200 a week on your paycheck. If you ran to work, you'd get an extra $400. And if you if you spent an hour in the gym at lunch, you were allowed a 2-hour lunch. So it incentivized people to be healthy, because that actually lowered their insurance premiums by millions, because people were a lot more healthy, and they also got a lot more productivity out of them and a lot less sick days, right? So that helped Nike. So we can maybe do that as well and say, hey, look, we can get your patients, or we can get your employees healthy, get a lot less sick days, and save you millions on your premiums. Rivero Health, which is what my friend Dr. Sean Baker is doing, that's sort of what they're trying to do too. But that's something that you can do, and then once you start getting that, some sort of industry behind it, then you can get this out there. Dr. Thomas Seyfried has been doing this with cancer, ketogenic metabolic therapy with cancer. And he's have over 150 peer-reviewed publications and studies showing that ketogenic carnivore diets can significantly help cancer outcomes and cancer survival. And for a lot of reasons that I won't get into, people can watch that interview that I do with Professor Seyfried if they want. And he was saying the same thing. As soon as we figure out how to have people make money off of treating people with cancer with keto, then this will start taking off. But until then, it's just going to be word of mouth. So that's what I'm trying to do. That's why I talk so much. I'm trying to get word of mouth going, and hopefully people just do this and try this and just give it a try. You try this for 30 days, 90 days. It's certainly not going to hurt you, and it could change. It could very well change your life, and it absolutely will. And then at that point, you influence other people and other people and other people, and that's how we get this out there. I don't consider myself doing the one that does this. It's the people that are doing this themselves, and then other people see them doing it. That's what's making the influence. So it's the people on the ground doing this, and it's already going. So I think it's just hopefully keep going. Then we can cure this from the ground up, and not have the problems that we're facing now. And doctors get back to doing what we've been doing for thousands of years, which was accidents and emergencies, injuries, sort of things. Pregnancy and childbirth, infectious disease, congenital and genetic diseases, and things like poisoning, snake bites, lead poisoning, and malnutrition. I mean, that's real medicine. But now we're just eating the wrong thing, and we're getting toxic exposure to plants and all this other garbage, and we're just not getting enough nutrition. And I think that's 90% of the problem with our health nowadays. So we just need to get rid of all that garbage and go back to what we treated before, and just get back to real medicine.
Yep. I love that. Well, I could probably ask you 50 million more questions, and so maybe we'll have to save that for a part 2, but it's been an absolute honor having you on, and I know I at least got an absurd amount of knowledge from this, and I'm excited for the people that listen to really get as much as they can from this. So I appreciate your time, and I really thank you for popping on.
Not a problem. It's a pleasure to speak with you, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for that.
Yeah. All right, people, we'll catch you next time. Thanks for tuning in.